You never know the battles someone is fighting behind their eyes. And you never know how a small act of kindness, one you forget in minutes, could change someone's entire life. It all started on a cloudy Tuesday morning, the kind that presses down on you like a heavy coat. Sarah Martin stood at the back of a long ATM line in downtown Chicago, tightly clutching her purse to her chest. She was late for work again, her phone battery was at 2%, and her mind raced with anxiety over the rent due in 5 days. Her manager had already warned her twice this month. One more late mark, and she was out. Despite all this, Sarah's heart hadn't hardened. That's just the kind of person she was, someone who still smiled at strangers, held doors open, and left dollar bills tucked in library books with notes that read, "You're doing okay, keep going." And then he walked in. The man wore a faded hoodie, torn jeans, and a look of total devastation on his face. He was in his early 40s, his eyes bloodshot, hands trembling, like he hadn't slept in days. He walked past the entire line, almost in a daze, and stopped just behind Sarah. Before anyone could react, he leaned forward and whispered in a broken voice, "Please, I need to go first. It's an emergency." Gasps came from the crowd. People shifted. A woman in front of Sarah scoffed loudly and said, "We all have emergencies. Get in line." But Sarah looked into his eyes. And what she saw there wasn't arrogance, or rudeness. It was loss. Utter, quiet loss. The kind of look you carry when your whole world has just collapsed. "Go ahead," she said softly, stepping aside. He blinked. "You sure?" She nodded, ignoring the mutters behind her. "Yeah, I'm sure." The man looked at her like she'd just handed him air underwater. He gave a tight nod, shuffled to the ATM, fumbled with a card, withdrew a small amount of cash, barely enough to fill a gas tank, and left without another word. Most people forgot about the incident before they even got to the front of the line. But Sarah didn't forget. Because she saw something familiar in him, the kind of quiet desperation she'd fought through herself. 3 years ago, she'd been the one living out of her car, scraping together enough for coffee so she could sit at cafes and apply for jobs on their free Wi-Fi. A few strangers had extended kindness then. She hadn't forgotten what that meant. But what Sarah didn't know, what no one in that line knew, was that the man who had just left in that worn-out hoodie was Daniel Keaton. Yes, that Daniel Keaton. Former tech CEO. Founder of ByteGate, the cybersecurity startup that had skyrocketed to a $300 million valuation just 2 years earlier. A man who'd once graced the covers of Forbes and TechWorld. A man who had more cars than he knew what to do with. A man who had lost everything, in 14 months. It started with his wife's sudden illness. She was his anchor, his muse, and his best friend. When they found out she had an aggressive form of leukemia, Daniel dropped everything to fight beside her. He sold parts of his company to pay for experimental treatments. His board pushed him out. Investors pulled funding. The company crumbled under a messy acquisition. And then, 2 months ago, she was gone. After the funeral, Daniel disappeared from the public eye. No more magazine covers. No more speeches or startup expos. Just grief and silence. That morning, he had driven into the city with no real plan. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. He had $42 left. He told himself he'd just withdraw enough for a sandwich, maybe find a shelter, maybe figure out if he still wanted to go on. And then Sarah had let him cut in line. It was nothing. Just a moment. But it was everything. Daniel didn't remember the sandwich. He remembered her face. A week later, Daniel walked into a nonprofit center with freshly washed clothes and a trimmed beard. He asked to volunteer. Every day. Quietly, he picked up shifts cleaning, organizing donation boxes, and cooking meals. He didn't tell anyone who he was. He didn't need to. One afternoon, while restocking food shelves, he saw her again. Sarah. She was talking with one of the coordinators, offering to help organize a fundraiser. Apparently, she'd been volunteering there for months. Daniel stared at her, stunned. Then he smiled. Maybe it was fate. Maybe something greater. He walked over, cleared his throat. "Hey," he said. Sarah turned and stared for a moment. "Oh," she said, smiling. "It's you. From the ATM." He chuckled softly. "Yeah. From the ATM." They talked for an hour that day. Then two the next. Slowly, Sarah learned his story, not all at once, but in pieces. The loss, the grief, the fall from grace. She didn't pity him. She understood. And in return, Daniel learned her story. The years of struggle, the dreams she'd set aside, the fire she still carried in her heart. They became friends. Months passed. One evening, while cleaning up after a benefit gala that Sarah had organized, raising over $70,000 for the shelter, Daniel stood beside her on the rooftop terrace. The city lights stretched endlessly. A breeze tugged at her jacket. He turned to her. "Sarah, you changed my life." She laughed. "What? By letting you cut in line?" "No," he said, serious now. "By seeing me. Really seeing me. When no one else did." She looked into his eyes and saw the same thing she had months ago, but this time, there was light. Then, something wild happened. Daniel launched a new startup, not for millions, but for purpose. A platform connecting people to local support systems, shelters, food banks, job training, and community resources. He called it LineKind, named after the moment that changed everything. And guess who he asked to be his co-founder? Sarah said yes. Not because of the money. But because she believed in the mission. She believed in him. And together, they built something incredible. Today, LineKind operates in over 30 cities, connecting over 2 million people with support they might never have known existed. At a TED Talk 2 years later, Daniel stood on stage and told the story of one moment of grace at an ATM, how a woman with problems of her own made room for a stranger, and in doing so, changed 2 lives. Maybe more. So next time you're in a rush, frustrated, tired, standing in line, remember this. One simple act of kindness may feel small in your world. But it might just be the turning point in someone else's. And sometimes, the person you're helping might just be a millionaire in disguise. But the real riches, the ones that matter most, are the ones we give away when we lead with empathy. Because kindness always comes back.